My name is Christine Galeb, and I am over in the Office of Innovation, which is a whole new thing for Princeton. Certainly, innovation has been happening at Princeton throughout its tenure. However, the Office of Innovation was started in September of 2024. So that might feel like a couple months ago, it might feel like a couple years ago, it might feel like a couple decades ago, depending on where you're standing. But we are so thrilled to have you here today. I've put the schedule up on the screen, and so you can familiarize yourself with it. It is also posted on the TV screens and various handouts throughout today. Won't spend too much time there. I will spend a little bit of time on logistics information. We love pictures. We love when you tag us in those pictures even more. So please do so. Meet new friends. Everyone should have a funder, founder, fueler, faculty ribbon, and that helps you identify who has also self-identified as one of those things. Discover new resources, so we'll have a tabling time during lunch where all of our innovation ecosystem partners will have their table, so make sure you stop by and say hi to them. Connect to Wi-Fi. I've put the Wi-Fi information up here just as a quick point of reference if you need to connect to Wi-Fi. This is how you do it. It is also posted in various places throughout our building here. So that being said, we will have a fireside chat to kick us off, a panel afterwards, and then we'll transition to our networking and mingle room. So I do want to shout out the people here on the screen. They are our mingle room leads, and they have worked incredibly hard to provide excellent networking opportunities for us during that mingle time. I will also shout out our mingle room highlights. These people will be speaking very briefly on their work in those mingle rooms, and so you get a chance to meet them and network with them as well. Mingle room highlights also presented here. So without further ado, it is now my pleasure to welcome up to the stage, they're already seated, but Craig Arnold, who is the Vice Dean for Innovation, the University Innovation Officer, the Susan, yeah, we can applaud. And then Tom Bergeron, who is the founder and CEO and editor of binge.com. I think I said that right. I don't know, I'm getting a groan, so maybe not. But they will be having a fireside chat of getting to the here and now, celebrating the first year of Princeton University's Office of Innovation. So I will turn the mic over to Tom.
There we go.
Thank you. First of all, a couple of ground rules and background. This is actually a UVA tie. I am not a Princeton person. This is actually the rotunda on my socks, although I think Craig won the sock game. Proud grad of UVA, and I just have to say that we're not quite at the same level as you guys are on that U.S. News report that nobody seems to read, but everybody seems to read. But we've often said if there ever was a ranking of colleges with alum that had the most overblown importance, UVA would be right at the top. So we're ready for that one. We're going to kick your butt in that and go from there. Craig and I have known each other more internationally than nationally. We've taken a couple of trips together, so this is great to be here. Happy to do this. Got a couple of jokes, got a couple of questions. We'll get through a half an hour and have a little fun. So I'm going to start with Craig, who everyone here knows, and I'm going to introduce you as the Susan Dodd Brown Professor of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, as well as the Vice Dean for Innovation, as well as the school's first innovation officer. Mm-hmm. So that's a hell of a business card. That's pretty long.
It's on both sides.
So let's do the background. Haverford, math and physics, you graduate, somehow you trick your way into a job at Princeton. You've been here for a couple of decades. Yeah. Give us your journey to get to Princeton.
Yeah, so I never wanted to be at Princeton. It was a total accident that I got a job at Princeton. So first off, thank you all for coming out. It is really phenomenal to see so much orange and black, even if some of it might be with UVA. But yeah, so I grew up in New York, on Long Island actually, and I went to a very, very small liberal arts college, Haverford College, about 1,000 students. And I was a physics and math major. I was also like 70 pounds lighter and a pretty fast runner at the time. But after college, I knew I wanted to teach. I knew I wanted to be a faculty member. And I went to graduate school, and I got my PhD in physics. I was at a school up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I won't say, having some challenges these days. But but I knew I wanted to teach. And so after that, I started thinking, what do I need to do to really expand my skills, to make me more amenable, better at being a teacher? And I decided to do a postdoc with the Navy. So I was doing research with the Navy for a couple of years, working on very applied types of problems, whereas before everything I was doing was very fundamental. And so, after I finished my time there, I was looking for a faculty position, and I looked exclusively at small liberal arts colleges because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to engage with students. I wanted to be involved in the ecosystem. And, I'd already kind of done my time in the Ivy League, and I felt, I want to be someplace smaller, someplace where I can really connect with the students. And I didn't even think about Princeton at all. And it wasn't until very late in the job search, and I ran into somebody at a conference who was from Princeton. He says, you should apply. And I'm like, I don't want to apply. He said, no, really, you should apply. It'll be good. So I applied. I sent my application material in, and this is a long time ago, so I had to physically FedEx a package, kind of thing. And I immediately get an email back in the early days, the next day, and it says, thank you for applying, we're not interested. And I said, all right, great. Why did I bother going through this? And then a month later, I get a phone call from a faculty member at Princeton saying, we want you to come out and interview. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I already got a rejection letter. I'm good with this. And he's like, no, that must have been a mistake. Who sent that letter? And I said the name. He's like, oh, they have no idea what they're talking about. We want you to come out. So I came out to interview, and it was President's Day, right? And there was this tremendous snowstorm. This was back in 2003, right? And if anyone was around at that time, any alums, there was this giant snowstorm, and it closed school on the day I was supposed to interview, right? So I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, hey, this is all the way it's supposed to be. I'm just not supposed to get a job at Princeton. This is okay. And so, I call up the person hosting me, and I said, what do I do? And he's like, where are you? I said, I'm in town. He said, how did you get here? All the trains were stopped, the roads were... I said, well, it was an interview. Just sit tight. We'll interview you the next day. Anyway, the next day, they interviewed me. By the end of the week, they made me an offer. And as I'm on the phone talking to the guy, the chair of the department says, we'd like to offer you a position. And I said, are you sure? Okay. and that's how I started my career at Princeton, right? I'm like, I don't know anything about mechanical and aerospace engineering. And he's like, no, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. We think you'll be fine. And, 20 some odd years later, here we are. And it all worked out just fine. But, really, I think the message there was that, I don't know that I was underestimating, but I thought I had a vision for what I wanted, but I had to actually visit Princeton. And once I did, it was actually really terrible because I loved it immediately. There was this instant, it was snow, it was covering the campus, it was beautiful. And then I started meeting the people. And I started realizing, oh my God, this is exactly what I was looking for. It's that small college where I can engage with people, but yet I have access to the resources that allow me to really drive research and technology forward. I just didn't know it existed. And so I still remember riding back on the train after the interview, talking to my wife, saying, oh, I loved it, but they're never gonna hire me. They must have interviewed 5 other people who are really good. But it all worked out. So I'm very happy and I'm very lucky about it.
There you go. I think Princeton is happy as well.
I hope so.
All right, you're talking about vision and not knowing what you want to do and trying to find new ways. And that goes to startups and startup mentality, right? Yeah. I know you yourself have been involved in startups. You've helped a lot of people in startups. I have down here, mechanical engineering, bioengineering, lithium batteries, AI, the whole works. Give us some sort of an idea of your own personal ones that you helped and who you've mentored, where they go, and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness. Startups and entrepreneurship, it's one of those things that people think doesn't really happen so much in universities, but it really is one of the core things that we do as a research university. Much of the research that we do, certainly as an engineer, I don't want to do it just so that I can know it and keep it to myself, right? I want to share it. I want to put it out into the world. And when you're developing technologies, one of those mechanisms is to start a company. Not always. You can license technology, you can write papers and things like that. But when I started out, I didn't really know that. I honestly didn't really know what engineering was. I thought that was the person who drives the train. But it turns out that it's actually much more than that.
They just got a really big raise.
I know. I'm very happy about that, by the way. No, I don't know. But in all seriousness, I didn't expect that to be where I was headed. But as soon as I started realizing that it was possible, it started opening up how I viewed science, how I viewed technology, how I did research. It allowed me to ask new kinds of questions, different kinds of questions that allowed me to move technology forward, right? So if I'm just thinking that the end result is I want to write a nice paper on it, or I should say my students write a nice paper on it, that's very different than saying I really want to have an impact. I want to do something that will affect people. And when you start thinking of it that way, you start realizing that the entrepreneurship side kind of comes with it. Now, obviously, you have to learn, right? And I hadn't realized it, but when I was in graduate school, I was already I'd taken a couple courses at the business school just to, kind of give me a little balance. And I remember thinking, gosh, business school is so much easier than graduate school. Maybe I was doing the wrong thing. But over the years, it just kept growing and growing. And you develop insight, you develop sort of an understanding, and you realize when to put on your entrepreneur hat, when to put on your researcher hat. And that helps you also to teach your students and mentor. And so, sort of your question was, some of what startups that I've done, some of the, I guess the most successful one was, it was a company called Tag Optics, where we invented this ridiculous device that can change its focus, a lens that can change its focus thousands of times faster than anything else out there. And this became really important for things like machine vision and robotics and other kinds of imaging applications. But also along the way, we did a number of other ones. I think my earliest spin out was in biodiesel, if anyone remembers what that is. That was not a successful one. But then my last one was a med tech one. It was on a biomedical device for injecting medication. And again, all of these, the commonality in the kinds of things that I did was about really solving a problem, like here's a problem, and then finding a solution and working to make that reality.
So I love the finding a problem and working to find a solution. But let me take you back one step in the idea. When undergraduates or graduate students come to you and say, hey, we found us a problem, we have a solution, and you're like, that's great in the entrepreneurial side, but there's other things they need to know about. What's your advice on a beginning entrepreneur on, you better make sure you pay the electric bill or get this or get that?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, I guess I say a lot of things I can't say in public, but yeah, I mean, look, entrepreneurship and starting a company, it's not like you see in the movies, I mean, maybe the TV show Silicon Valley was maybe closest to reality, but when you start talking about deep tech and you start talking about things that have technology component to it, you have to realize that it takes time. If you don't know the details of what you're doing, you will not be successful. Right? So in my case, when I started Tag Optics, I actually invented the technology. Our patent was filed in 2005. It wasn't until 6 years later that I started the company, right? Because in those 6 years, I had to really understand the science and the technology. Because as soon as you make a product, someone's going to ask you a question about it, right? And if you can't answer it, you have a problem, right? And so, what I find with a lot of students, a lot of the mentoring is that there's sometimes this desire to skip the homework, as it were, right? I just want to get to the final exam.
Really?
Yeah, it happens, believe it or not. And then they all want an A on it. but no, not you, just certain people. No. But no, what I found is that, so I'll give you an example. I think better a story, right? So right after I had exited Tag Optics, I got an email from a student, and I get emails all the time, and a lot of times, anyone who knows me knows that you may or may not get an answer from me. But I said, sure, whatever, come meet with me. He said, I have a thought about a company, something I'm interested in. He was a first-year student. He was like a sociology major or something. He wasn't a technology person. He comes in and he tells me, he says, hey, listen, I'm a hemophiliac, and I have to give myself an injection every day, and I wish there were an easier way to do that, because sometimes you miss, it's painful, and then especially if it's a young kid, I mean, you have it your whole life. Your parents have to inject a 2-year-old or something, right? And he says, I wish that there was something we can do, but I don't know any technology. I don't know what to do. And I said to him, listen, this is a really great problem. Let's work on it together. And I said, let's meet up. We'll meet like once a week or once every other week. And I would give him homework. I'd say, listen, I want you to learn, what are people doing? And we started digging deeper and deeper. And as he was digging deeper into it, he was teaching me about it too. And I was learning about the real problems. And ultimately, the process that I followed is all right, let's find a problem that we can tackle. Maybe we're not going to cure cancer, but let's think about the details of what we want to do. And gradually we developed that knowledge base. And that led us to, develop some intellectual property. We then started a company on that. And that was an injection device that I had talked about. But really it came because I had a student who I didn't come up with the problem. He had the problem, but I had certain skill set, and I was able to teach him about it and teach him the technology. And I think when it comes to sort of small startups, what I found is that the success really is the team, right? It's the people. It's not just, you can't have just a really good idea. You have to have a good idea, but you also have to have a good team of people that bring complementary skills to the table. And there has to be an honesty. Like, most people are not truly honest with themselves. All right? We convince ourselves we know everything, we can do everything. But, in reality, when it comes to these things, you have to say, I don't know the answer to that problem. Do you know how hard it is for a Princeton professor to say, I don't know the answer? I mean, how many times do you hear that, right? It's very rare. But when you start from that, hey, listen, we can learn from each other. The successful entrepreneurships, I find, are when the business person can understand and be respectful of the technology, and the technology can understand and be respectful of the business, because you need both of them. You can't succeed without it, So that's where I start driving on the mentorship, is making sure we build the right teams of people.
I think it's fair to say with Craig, we're mixing technology and innovation with a vision for the future for, I'm going to say, space age, something we said in our younger year, to come up with these unbelievably new products and invention to take us to the next step. So as I was cyber stalking Craig before this, I came upon this one club that he works on that I think is just the greatest example of looking forward ever. You might not know this, but Craig is also the mentor for the Blacksmith Club at Princeton. To explain how that type of scenario takes you in the modern day and the learning techniques, aside from
Oh my God, that's like my favorite thing. It took me so long to pull that off. Okay, you have no idea how hard it is. So believe it or not, I grew up, I didn't think I was going to do any of this. I thought I was going to be a truck driver, right? My father was a truck driver. I was going to be a truck driver. And then they changed the laws that you had to be 21 to get a license. So I said, I'm going to go to college. All right, truthfully, I was a pretty good student. I'll be honest. But anyway, blacksmithing. So I was always very interested in mechanical hands-on thing. And when I first started here teaching, I was teaching a course on, a lab course on material science, right? And how to understand materials. And I just kept getting back into metalworking. My PhD dissertation, back when I did it, I wrote a whole section on steel and the history of it. So I had this background knowledge. And I'm like, it would be so cool to do blacksmithing. And so, I don't know, maybe about 15, I'm trying to think, let's see. So maybe about 14 years ago or so, I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have this blacksmithing day. And we invited a couple blacksmiths, and we're going to have a small little event outside in front of Bowen Hall, and we were thinking maybe 5, 10 kids will show up. There was 150 people showed up, okay? And we didn't have enough food. We didn't have enough porches. It was like, where did all these people come from? Why are they so interested in this? And I'm like, we need to start a club. But a faculty member needs the students to start the club. So we did this as an annual event. We still do it every year in October. If you're around, come to the big blacksmithing day. But then throughout the year, we have a club. And so, I created it sort of because, first off, it teaches really good material science. That's my background. And you can learn a lot from physically handling an object, okay? But don't physically handle something that's red hot. That's bad. But you could tell the difference about the material from how it feels, the colors, things like that. And it lets you really work out some of your aggression. I could say I've turned many a round piece into a twisted work of metal art, I guess we'd call it.
Just a programming note, at 12:30 today, Craig and a couple of kids are going to teach you how to shoe a horse out in the lobby. So if that's what you're interested in, we're going to make that available.
I do have a farrier forge at home. I do. So I could in principle do that, but yeah.
All right, since we're making a lot of jokes, I thought I'd bring up federal funding right now.
Excellent, yes.
Look, let's...
Two scientists walk into a bar. No, this is not that kind of joke. All right.
Let's what we like to say are opportunities and challenges. Let's skip over the challenges and let's talk about opportunities. Let's talk about where funding can come from. A lot of the people in this room are got their checkbook ready, Craig. What are they going to do? Yeah, no, that's what I heard.
Yeah. So make it out to CASH and then just hand it to me. We'll be okay. Yeah.
What can you talk to people about when you want to become a founder, when you want to become a financier, anything with the F's? What
Yeah.
are you looking for? What do they need to know? How does that come together? And what's the email? How do they get a hold of you for something like that?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of like 3 questions in there that you asked. So I'll start with the first one, which is the sobering one, which is, yeah, we're in a very challenging time right now. I mean, universities are it's really unprecedented what's happening. But at the same time, what we are doing really impacts society in important ways. And so the first thing that I always say is, Princeton has put out a lot of good information, but one of the big ones is this activity, I guess you would call it, called Stand Up Princeton. And you might see some pins around. I see, Kristen, you have a pin on. Yeah, we should definitely applaud for this. And so the first thing that I say for alums, people in the finance community, the VCs, things like that, is get involved with that. We all need to be talking about how the work that we do in a research university like Princeton is really changing the world for good. I mean, a lot of you are not listening to me and looking at your cell phone screen. You probably don't know that cell phone screen is Princeton intellectual property. That is a Princeton spin out that created the display in that phone, right? If somebody ever knows somebody who had skin cancer and it was treated with Olympta, that's a drug that was discovered and developed here at Princeton, right? Those are the things that are really affecting the world. So the first thing that I always say to your first question is stand up Princeton, right? Go to the webpage, sign up, get involved, be a proponent for it just like we are. Tell all your friends that we are making a difference in the world. The second question that you asked was about how do you engage with us, right? How do you get to us? And so, the first thing, of course, is that, there's lots of, email lists and web pages, and we have one, and we're working on kind of making it a little better, sort of a Princeton Innovation Network for those of you who are interested in wanting to engage with the innovation space. And Christine over there has been running point on a lot of it. I see Don over there as well most people probably know Don had been heavily engaged in our alumni outreach efforts and stuff. So again, connecting either to me, my email, or to them, to our office, we can get you connected on the list, and that will get you in. Now, the third part of your question was, how do you engage if you're looking not just to support us, but you're actually looking to write that check? Right? And those are our favorite. No, they're not our favorite. Those are good engagements. No, so I mean, if you're looking to get engaged with some of the spin outs that we have, so you want to engage as a VC, as an angel or something like that, we have a couple of different sort of venues and events and things that we do throughout the year. We have our big Celebrate Princeton Innovation event, which is in the fall. Which you're certainly welcome to come out to, where you can see some of our founders, some of our technologies, some of our patents and inventors. You can engage there. We also have a number of showcase events. So we actually do quite a bit throughout the year. And if you are a VC, note that when you reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you're on that list of the potential engagement. And we'll share with you companies. I see one of my colleagues, Jason, is here, has a tremendous startup looking at harvesting critical materials like lithium and others from brines. It's changing the world right now. And so, things like that. We can connect you with some of the really best and the brightest founders that are really on the verge of doing big things.
So I had the pleasure of attending the Genius Gala at the Liberty Science Center this week.
Yeah.
I was not being honored. I was attending. And the one point they made was, this is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I don't think people understand that to become an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean you need to send a rocket to the moon or cure cancer. It's just ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and it starts with a speck and it grows, and Princeton can help people do that.
Absolutely. This is always the conversation I have with, like, a lot of the younger students, the undergraduates, maybe sophomores, juniors, whatever. And they're like, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, all right, well, think of a problem. Just anything. It doesn't matter what affects you. The best idea I ever had for a company was when I was a graduate student. I'll tell you a quick story, right? So back then in graduate school, I used to drive a motorcycle. And again, I was up in Cambridge, right? So in the wintertime, it was a little bit, let's say, unpleasant.
I'll say stupid, but you can say unpleasant. That's fine.
So I would have to take the bus. And I hated taking the bus, right? Not because I was, too good for the bus or whatever, but I hated standing outside waiting for the bus to come. It's like, and this was like early days of like cell phones, right? This was in the 90s. So I'm like, why can't there be something where the bus can just call my phone and tell me when it's close? You know, and I went through this, and I was talking to a friend who was in the business school, and he's like, that's a good idea. We should start a company on this. And like 6 months earlier, a company in San Francisco called Nextbus had started. And now that's the technology that we see all around, you know, for trains and buses. But I was 6 months too late to that. Okay, so that was probably my best idea ever. But yeah, I mean, it all starts with the problem. Find something that affects your life. You're probably not so different than everybody else. And they probably have similar needs. And so you start there, you start learning about the markets, you learning about what people really need, and you might discover that there's a place where you can make a personal and impactful contribution to society.
All right, for folks of you who have seen my Dog and Pony show, I try to end everything with what we call a lightning round. A little comedy, give a little insight into Craig.
Oh, no.
So we have a variety of questions we're going to do. We're going to put
insight.
60 seconds on the imaginary clock and drill
Okay.
it. Maybe you get a big thing of toothpaste at the end when you win. So let's start with this. Just scattershoot, top of your mind. Most significant and impactful scientific mind, Einstein or Edison?
Scientific, I'd say Einstein.
Okay.
Technology, I'd say Edison.
Next scientific question. What are we eating tonight, pizza or pasta?
Oh, pizza.
Biggest,
Joe's Pizza up in Hillsborough.
biggest question of the day.
Conti's, sorry, Conti's in Princeton.
Okay to put pineapple on your pizza?
No, absolutely not.
We're going to throw down on that one.
Absolutely not.
All right, advancement of AI.
Yes.
Greatest achievement in lifetime history, a huge milestone, or is it just another blip? Like we said that about the personal computer, we said about the cell phone. 25 years from now, will we look at AI and say this was a tremendous thing for mankind, or it was just the next big thing?
No, well, I mean, I'm not sure I would go. I think soap is probably bigger than AI, but in terms of humanity. But like seriously, right? Someone had to invent soap, right? I would say it's like a really useful new tool, right? I mean, if you get a new type of wrench or something that makes you better at doing your job, I think it's going to make us better at the jobs we do. I think it's going to be a really effective tool. You know, I'm not sure if we're going to go down the Matrix or Terminator as the way that we end society, but for now, I think it's going to be a majorly important tool that we'll have in our toolbox.
All right, I'm going to segue to Eddie Money here for those who get the reference. You got 2 tickets to
Paradise? No, sorry.
a Broadway play, a sporting event, or a concert. Where are we going tonight?
I guess a Broadway play, because the 2 tickets I have to bring my wife, right? Wait, sorry,
not
you didn't
required.
specify. You didn't specify.
There's going to be a mingle session later, so let's talk after that.
No. All right. No. So 2 tickets. I'm bringing my wife. We're going to a Broadway play. I'm bringing my friends who might be going to a sporting event, but we won't go too far.
I'm going to do one last one, and this is an ode to the late, great George Wendt. Favorite TV show, Family Guy, Seinfeld, or Cheers?
Family Guy. Absolutely. Come on.
See, I know that Craig's seen every episode of Family Guy, so that was a loaded question. Here's the real question. Stewie or Peter, who's your favorite character?
Stewie. Stewie.
I'm Tom, that's Craig. Round of applause.